I'm Jenna, I'm 29, and the day my own family kicked me out of the house I helped clean, paint, and repair for years, I made myself a quiet promise. One day, I'll come back. Not to ask for anything. Just to show them I never needed their approval in the first place. If you've ever had your family make you feel like you were disposable, like your presence was a problem, comment below and subscribe. Right now, I'm standing in the kitchen of my new home. There's a dent in the fridge from where the last owner apparently dropped a box of tools. The cabinets creak when I open them. The AC vents rattle like they've got something stuck inside. But I love it, because it's mine, and the wildest part, my parents live one house over. I can see their garage from my bedroom window. That fact alone is insane when you realize how we got here. The truth is, this didn't all explode overnight. I wish I could say there was one massive fight, one betrayal, one dramatic slap across the face kind of moment. But the real damage? It was slow, quiet, like a faucet drip that becomes a flood when you're not paying attention. Let me start at the beginning. Growing up, I was the classic middle child, invisible but expected to overachieve. My older brother Brandon was the golden boy, captain of the swim team, went into finance, bought a condo at 26, married his college girlfriend. My little sister Abby was the wild one, constantly getting rescued by my parents, by me, by anyone willing to bail her out of her latest mess. And me, I was the one who got, well, Jenna will figure it out. I always did. Until I didn't. I moved out right after college and started freelancing in digital marketing. I had my own little studio apartment in the city. I didn't make a lot, but I paid my bills. I never asked my parents for help. And when things were good, I helped them. When my dad threw out his back last summer, I drove out and mowed their lawn for 3 weekends in a row. When my mom broke her wrist, I brought groceries and did her dishes every night for a week. No one asked me to. I just showed up, but when I lost my job last year, suddenly, I became the family embarrassment. It was early spring. My biggest client folded without warning. Then another contract got put on hold indefinitely. Suddenly, I was juggling 5 interviews a week, watching my savings bleed out, and doing the math on how many days I could go without turning my heat on. Eventually, I had no choice but to move back in with my parents. They said yes, of course. But they didn't say it like they meant it. The first week was fine. My mom made lasagna. My dad offered to help me with my resume. Brandon even stopped by and brought donuts. But that sweetness turned sour fast. By week 2, the comments started. Maybe you should try something more stable, Dad said while reading the newspaper like it was 1992. Any updates on jobs? My mom would ask, right after I'd come back from a 3rd-round interview where they ghosted me afterward. Don't you have a marketing degree? Isn't that, like, in demand? Brandon snorted one night over dinner. I tried to let it go. Told myself they were just trying to help in their weird, passive-aggressive way. But the truth? They never believed in what I did. They didn't understand freelance life. They didn't get that building a digital portfolio takes time. That gigs come in waves. That sometimes you hustle for months just to land a 3-month contract that barely pays enough to cover groceries and car insurance. To them, if I wasn't wearing a name badge and clocking in, I was wasting time. And God forbid I showed any emotion about it. One afternoon, I cried in my room after getting a rejection email that read, "We loved your energy, but we're going in a different direction." 10 minutes later, my mom knocked. "Can you keep it down, sweetie? Your dad's watching a documentary." I wiped my face, nodded, and swallowed the scream I wanted to let out. A month in, I started staying in my room more. Eating alone. Pulling away. It was safer that way. Then came the cookout. Brandon's 30th birthday. My mom started planning it like it was a royal wedding. She printed color-coded invites, set up Pinterest boards, and turned our tiny backyard into some Pinterest vision of Southern hospitality. I asked her if she needed help. She said, no. Brandon's wife and her sisters are coming over to decorate. Cool. I offered to make a side dish. She hesitated. Actually, it's probably better if you just take the day to yourself. I blinked. Wait, are you saying I'm not invited? She smiled that tight, rehearsed smile I've seen my whole life. We just want it to be a peaceful day. No tension. Tension. I asked, my throat already tightening. You've been on edge, she said gently. And you know how Brandon is. He just wants good vibes. Good vibes. I left the room before I could scream. Later that night, I asked my dad if he agreed. He didn't even look up from his laptop. Your mom's right. It's his day. Just let it be about him. I went to bed early that night. Not because I was tired, because I was done. The next morning, I packed my things. Every box, every bag, every charger, every bit of myself that didn't belong there anymore. I didn't yell. I didn't write a dramatic goodbye note. I just left. I crashed with a friend for 2 weeks. Then another. I bounced between couches and cheap hotels while I job hunted nonstop, and eventually, I landed something. A marketing manager role at a mid-sized firm that actually valued creative work. It didn't pay 6 figures, but it paid my bills. It gave me structure, purpose, freedom, and the first thing I did with my first 2 paychecks, I started house hunting. At first, I looked far away. I didn't want to be anywhere near my family. But then, something petty in me flared. I checked Zillow out of spite, just for fun, and wouldn't you know it, the house right next door to my parents was on the market. It wasn't perfect. Needed updates. The roof would need repairs in 2 years. But it was affordable. Barely. And the loan officer said I qualified. When I closed on it 3 months later, I didn't tell anyone. I waited until move-in day. I backed up my U-Haul, stepped out in sunglasses and ripped jeans, and waved at my mom as she stood frozen on her front porch, watering can tilted midair. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. I smiled, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted her to see, you didn't break me, you didn't bury me. You motivated me, and now? You get to see me grow every single day from right next door. Let me tell you something about moving into a house that touches the edge of your parents' backyard after they basically told you to get lost. It's weird. And awkward. And at times, absolutely hilarious. But at first, it was mostly just tense. I moved in on a Sunday. It was humid and overcast. The kind of day where everything sticks to your skin, and even the air feels heavy with unfinished business. I had a few friends helping me unload the U-Haul. We laughed, played music from a portable speaker, tried to keep it light, but every time I turned my head, I could feel it, the stare. My mom, standing in her kitchen window, arms folded, mouth a straight line. My dad, pretending to rake the same patch of grass he'd already gone over 5 times. And Brandon? He actually came outside for a bit. Said nothing. Just stood by their driveway with a beer, watching like he was inspecting a neighborhood raccoon setting up camp. I wanted to ignore them. I tried to ignore them, but I'm human. I felt the heat rising in my chest every time I carried a box up my front steps and caught them glancing over. Was it shame? Guilt? Judgment? Maybe all 3. But I didn't let it stop me. By 7 p.m., the truck was empty. My living room was a disaster zone, boxes stacked in corners, couch still in plastic, half my mugs in the bathroom for some reason. But I was home. I sat on the floor, legs stretched out, eating Chinese takeout straight from the container with a plastic fork. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since before I moved back in with them. Peace. No one was criticizing how I spent my time. No one was hovering in the hallway while I cried. No one was monitoring my worth like a stock that kept dropping. This space? It was mine. It smelled like fresh paint and lemon-scented cleaner. It echoed when I left. It buzzed with possibility. I slept on a mattress on the floor that night. No bed frame. No curtains. Just me, a half-unpacked suitcase, and the sound of a ceiling fan clicking overhead. I didn't even mind the boxes, because every taped-up one was proof. You did this. On your own. The next morning, I woke up to a knock at the door. It was barely 8 a.m. I shuffled to the front in slippers, eyes puffy, hair a mess, and there she was. My mom, standing on my porch with a small tray of blueberry muffins and that tight-lipped expression she always wore when she was pretending to be nice, but secretly wanted to say something sharp. "Hi," she said. I blinked. "Hi. I thought I'd bring you breakfast. You must be exhausted after yesterday." I took the tray from her, unsure how to respond. "Thanks." She didn't leave. Instead, she stepped back and gave my door frame a once-over. "You know this place needs a lot of work, right?" And there it was. I smiled tightly. "Yeah, but I like a project. She gave a polite nod. Well, just don't overextend yourself. Houses are more expensive than they look. Then she turned and walked back toward her house without another word. Welcome home, Jenna. I closed the door and set the muffins on the counter. I stared at them for a long time. The old me, the Jenna who used to fold in on herself every time someone questioned her decisions, might have cried. Might have called a friend and spiraled for an hour. But this me, I just poured a cup of coffee, opened the box labeled plates and stuff, and went about my day, because I didn't move next door to prove anything to them. Okay, maybe I did a little, but mostly, I did it for me. To reclaim space. To reclaim myself. The weeks that followed were a mix of surreal and strangely therapeutic. I fixed a leaky faucet by watching a YouTube video, painted the second bedroom by myself, 3 coats. Thank you very much. Hung up fairy lights in the backyard and hosted a tiny housewarming party with 2 close friends and a charcuterie board from Trader Joe's. My parents weren't invited, but they saw it. They heard the music. Saw the cars parked out front. Watched me laugh and toast sparkling wine from across the yard like I was a stranger living some other life. And in a way, I was a better version of me. Brandon made it awkward at every turn. Anytime we crossed paths at the mailbox, in the driveway, during trash pickup, he had to say something. You still in marketing? Or, looks like your grass needs mowing. Want me to ask Dad to lend you the tools? Your porch light flickered last night. Hope it's not an electrical thing. I answered with a smile each time, polite. Disengaged. He didn't like that. He wanted a reaction. Some sign that I was still fragile. Still waiting for validation, but I wasn't. And that's what started to get under his skin. About 2 months after I moved in, I caught wind of a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I was walking back from the corner market, headphones in but no music playing. Just wanted to block out the world a little. As I approached my house, I heard voices, loud ones, coming from my parents' backyard. Embarrassing, Brandon was saying. You don't just buy a house next door like it's a game. She's trying to prove a point, my dad replied. It's not subtle. Maybe if you two hadn't let her move back in, she'd have figured it out sooner. My mom sighed. I thought she'd be grateful. Instead, she's playing homeowner like it means something. I stood frozen behind the fence, heart pounding, and then, as if on cue, my mom added the line that stuck with me for days. She always wants to be the victim. But now she gets to play the success story. I turned and walked back around the block before they could see me. I didn't cry. I didn't storm over and demand an apology. I just let the silence speak. And when I got home, I opened my laptop and started researching home equity loans. Because if they thought I was done growing, they were in for a surprise. By that fall, I'd refinished the floors, updated the cabinets, and installed a new mailbox with my name on the side in clean, black lettering. Neighbors waved to me now. People asked for marketing help after finding out what I did. I started freelancing again on the side. Built a new client list. Slowly rebuilt my savings. One afternoon, I was planting flowers near the front steps when a woman walking her dog stopped. You're the one who just moved in, right? Yeah, I said. Been here about 4 months. She smiled. You've done a lot with the place. It looks great. I smiled back. Thank you. As she walked away, I glanced over. My mom was at her window, watching again, and this time, I waved. She didn't wave back, but I didn't need her to, because I wasn't there to make her proud. I was there to make myself proud. And I was finally doing it. I thought buying the house next door would give me a sense of power. Maybe even a little satisfaction, some form of silent victory after all the humiliation. And in the beginning, it did. Every time I pulled into my driveway, saw my name on the mailbox, stepped onto a porch that I paid for, I felt a small flicker of triumph. But power and peace are not the same thing, and the closer I lived to my family, the more I started to see that for myself. It started with the mail. About 3 months in, I noticed letters addressed to J. Matthews ending up in my parents' mailbox. Not a huge deal, happens sometimes when houses are that close. I figured it was just a mix-up. So I walked over one afternoon, rang the bell, and waited. My dad answered. His face was the same flat expression I'd seen at graduation, birthdays, Every event where he showed up because he had to, not because he wanted to. What is it? He asked, like I was a solicitor. I held up the envelope. Think this came to you by mistake. He took it without a thank you. I'll tell your mother. And that was it.no invitation inside. No small talk. Not even a nod of acknowledgement that I lived feet from him. Just a closed door. Again. That's the thing they don't tell you about proximity. It doesn't equal closeness. It doesn't fix broken bridges. It just lets you see, up close, exactly how wide the gap is, and the gap between me and my family. It was more like a canyon. Still, I tried, not because I wanted back in, but because part of me, the old part, still thought maybe we could build something. Not what we had before, but a truce. A middle ground. So I started with the one person I missed the most, my little sister, Abby. She was 24, still living at home, working part-time at a bakery while she tried to figure things out. Abby was never the problem child, but she was the escape artist. She had a gift for disappearing emotionally, physically, whatever. If things got too real, Abby vanished like smoke, but I missed her. So I texted her one night. Me, hey, wanna come over for dinner sometime this week? I make a mean pasta. Garlic bread included. It took her 3 days to respond. Abby, sure. Maybe Thursday? And that was how it began. Thursday night, I cooked her favorite, penne with vodka sauce and extra parmesan. I even made salad and got a tiny cake from the bakery she worked at. When she walked through my front door, it was like stepping back in time, only she looked older. Tired. And something about her smile didn't reach her eyes, but she hugged me. And for the first time in a long time, that mattered. Dinner was awkward at first. Lots of chewing. Some forced small talk. She complimented my place. I told her the paint color was called Pearl Fog, and we laughed at how stupid paint names always were. Then, about halfway through the second glass of wine, she finally said it. You know Mom tells everyone you moved in out of spite, right? I froze. I figured, I said quietly, she says you did it to embarrass them. That you want people to think they kicked you out, when really, you just didn't try hard enough. I blinked. Didn't try hard enough at what? She shrugged. Living. Being part of the family. Being normal. There it was again. That word they all love to toss around like a measuring stick. Normal. What they meant was compliant. Predictable. Acceptable on paper. Abby stared into her wine like it might offer an escape. I think you're doing great, she said finally. For what it's worth. It hit harder than I expected. Thanks, I whispered. We didn't talk about the past after that. Or our parents. Or Brandon. We just watched an episode of some ridiculous reality show and laughed over cheap ice cream and stale cake, and for one brief night, it felt like family again. But of course, it didn't last. The next day, my mom texted me for the first time in months. No. Hi. No, how are you? Just, I don't appreciate you dragging Abby into whatever tension you're trying to create. I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying. Me, I invited my sister over for dinner. That's not tension. That's life. Her response came fast. You're manipulating her. Just like you tried to manipulate us. I didn't answer. I just blocked her number. Not forever. But for right now, because I had boundaries now. Real ones. And I wasn't going to let her bulldoze me with guilt trips and cold logic masked as concern. A week later, I ran into Brandon in the grocery store. He was in the frozen aisle, grabbing a bag of peas. I was reaching for ice cream. He saw me and rolled his eyes. Still playing the victim? I didn't flinch. Still pretending you didn't help push me out? He smirked. You really think you're some kind of hero, don't you? No, I said calmly. I think I'm surviving. Which is more than I can say for the relationships I used to care about. He walked away after that. Didn't say goodbye, and I stood there for a long time, letting my ice cream melt in my hand while I tried not to cry in front of a display of frozen lasagnas. Because the truth is, as much as I'd grown, as much as I'd learned to stand tall on my own, it still hurt. Being rejected by your family doesn't get easier just because you build a life without them. The wound scabs over, sure. But sometimes something brushes against it and rips it right back open. So I started writing, not for work, for me. Late at night, after brushing my teeth and turning off the porch light, I'd sit in bed with my laptop and just Bleed. I wrote about the day they asked me not to come to Brandon's birthday. I wrote about the silence after I walked out of their house with my suitcase. I wrote about how hard it was to open boxes alone. How terrifying it was to sign a mortgage without anyone cheering me on. How surreal it felt to mow my lawn while my dad watched from behind a curtain, arms crossed. The words came fast. Messy. Unpolished. But they were mine. I never planned to share them. But one night, Abby came over again, brought over leftover cupcakes, and fell asleep on my couch halfway through a movie. I covered her with a blanket and went to bed. In the morning, she was still there, sitting at my kitchen table with coffee and my laptop open. I panicked. Abby, were you reading? She looked up, teary-eyed. I didn't mean to. I was just checking my email and your doc was open. But Jenna, she paused, it's beautiful. I froze. You should publish it, she said. People need to hear this. I shook my head. No one wants to read about a woman whose family thinks she's the problem. Exactly, she said. That's why they need it. You're not alone. People just don't talk about it. And that was the moment I realized maybe this story wasn't just mine. Maybe it belonged to every woman who ever got pushed out of her own family and made a life anyway. Maybe someone out there was sitting in her car right now, wondering if she was overreacting or just finally realizing she deserved more. So I hit publish, anonymously, posted the first essay on a medium-sized blog site. It didn't go viral, but it reached people. And every time someone left a comment like, "This happened to me too," I cried reading this. Thank you for writing what I couldn't say out loud. I felt a piece of my shame evaporate, because this isn't just my story. It's ours. And telling it, it's the bravest thing I've ever done. There's this thing that happens when you start to find your footing after a fall, especially when that fall was caused by people who were supposed to love you. You start to doubt the ground beneath you. Even when life seems okay again, the bills are paid, the fridge is full, your emails aren't terrifying. There's this voice in your head whispering, what if it all disappears again? That voice used to run my life. Every time I published a new blog post about what happened with my family, I'd stare at the screen afterward, heart racing, wondering if I'd gone too far. If I'd crossed some invisible line. If my parents would retaliate, but nothing happened. No angry calls. No surprise knocks on my door. Just silence. Until one night, that silence finally cracked. I was sitting on the porch, glass of wine in hand, reading through comments on my newest post. This one was about the day I got kicked out, written in brutal, unapologetic detail. I hadn't named names, but anyone who knew me would know exactly who I meant, and right in the middle of the quiet, I heard her voice, Jenna. I turned. It was my mother, standing at the edge of my walkway, holding a manila envelope like it was burning a hole through her hand. She looked thinner than I remembered. Not physically, just dimmed. Like someone had turned down the brightness on her. I didn't say anything. Just stared. She stepped forward. Can we talk? I raised my eyebrows. Now. She looked down. Please. I sighed and set my glass aside. All right. She came up the steps slowly, like she was approaching a stranger's house. She sat on the edge of the porch bench, clutching the envelope like a life raft. I read your blog, she said after a moment. I nodded. I figured. Silence. I didn't know you felt that way. I let out a bitter laugh. You didn't know I felt unwanted? After you asked me not to come to Brandon's birthday? After you told me I needed to move on less than a month after I lost my job? After you made it clear that my presence was tolerated at best? Her face crumpled slightly. I never meant. You didn't have to mean it, I said sharply. You just had to say it. And you did. She blinked fast. Your father, he didn't want me to come here. He says I'm being manipulated. I rolled my eyes. Of course he does. But I needed to say something. I needed to give you this. She held out the envelope. I hesitated, then took it. Inside was a stack of printed pages. Legal documents. Oh well. I frowned. What is this? We're rewriting the estate, she said. He wanted to remove you entirely. Said you'd made your choices. Said you'd distanced yourself. But I couldn't. I couldn't let him do that. My stomach turned. Why are you showing me this? Because, she said, voice shaking, I want you to know I see what you've done. I see this house. This life you built. I read every word you wrote. And even though it hurts, even though some of it is hard to read, I think I finally understand. I stared at her. You don't get to erase what you did with a will, Mom. She nodded slowly. I know. But it's the only thing I had left to offer. A way to show you that you still matter. That I haven't given up on you. My chest ached, because part of me wanted to believe her, part of me wanted to fall into her arms and sob and say, I missed you. But the other part, the part that survived sleeping on couches and rebuilding her life from scratch, that part knew better. So I said, I'm not ready to forgive you. Her eyes glistened. I know. But I'm not shutting the door either. She nodded, and for the first time since I left their house with a single suitcase and no clue where I was going, I saw her, not the version of her that always backed my dad. Not the woman who tried to keep the peace at the cost of her daughter's heart, just a mother, trying, failing, but trying. She stood slowly. Can I come back sometime? Maybe for coffee? I shrugged. We'll see. She smiled weakly and walked away, and I sat there, holding the envelope, wondering what the hell just happened. The next day, I told Abby. We were at a cafe, splitting a muffin and comparing notes on terrible dating app profiles. When I mentioned Mom's visit, she froze. She came to your house? Yeah, with a copy of their will. Abby shook her head. She must really be scared. Of what? Of losing you for real. I didn't say anything, but it lingered with me all day, because deep down I wondered, had she already lost me? Or was there still a chance to rebuild something new? That night, I sat down and wrote a post. Not about them, about me, about what it felt like to finally stand up to the people who raised you. About the guilt that follows. The confusion. The ache that never really goes away, even when you're doing better. I wrote, healing doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it just means you stop hoping the apology will come in the exact words you needed. And you start finding peace in your own reflection instead. That post hit harder than any I'd written before. People flooded the comments. This. Just this. I needed this tonight. Thank you. My mom died before we ever made peace. This gives me hope I can still heal without it. And that's when it clicked. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was helping other people rebuild theirs. My pain, this raw, messy, uncomfortable history, it had become something useful, not as a weapon, but as a bridge, and slowly, I started letting people in again, not just readers. Friends, people I distanced myself from because I was too ashamed to explain the story. The ones who texted after the blog took off and said, I'm sorry I wasn't there. I didn't know how bad it was. Some I forgave, some I didn't, but I was learning how to choose who got a seat at my table, not because of obligation, but because of respect. And then, something unexpected happened. An email from a publisher, small, independent, but legit. They'd read my blog. They wanted to talk about a book. At first, I thought it was a scam, but it wasn't. We had Zoom calls. We shared ideas. They asked questions like, what would you title this, and what themes do you think matter most to your readers? And suddenly, this messy, painful, deeply personal story became something bigger. They offered me an advance. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to prove that my story mattered, enough to show that surviving wasn't just a quiet, private victory. It could be a shared one. So I said yes, and I signed the contract. And 1 year to the week after I moved into this house next door to the people who gave up on me, I was writing a book about what happened, not for revenge, not for pity, but for truth, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is tell your story loud enough that someone else hears their own in the echo. By the time fall rolled around, the house felt like mine. Not just because the walls were painted and the floors were finished. Not just because my name was on the deed. But because I had finally filled the space with something no one could take from me. Peace. I'd wake up in the mornings, open the back door to let the breeze in, and sip coffee on my porch while the leaves turned gold and the air started to shift. Sometimes I'd hear my dad's lawnmower sputtering in the background or my mom's voice drifting out of the kitchen window as she talked on the phone. But it didn't get under my skin anymore. I'd built a quiet little sanctuary just a few feet away from the people who once made me feel like I didn't belong anywhere. And they couldn't touch it. Or me. Not anymore. Meanwhile, the blog kept growing. What started as a few personal essays had snowballed into something I never expected. People started emailing me. Women, men, even teenagers. People from different states, different countries, saying the same thing in 100 different ways. I thought I was alone. You said the thing I've never had the courage to say out loud. Reading your words felt like someone finally understood. I started writing more, not just about my family, but about boundaries, grief, starting over. The awkward mess of learning how to trust again after people you love weaponize your vulnerability. It wasn't therapy. But it was healing, and it gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. By the time my publisher sent me the first layout of my manuscript, I cried. Ugly, full-body cried, because for so long, I believed the lie my parents had quietly spoon-fed me. You're too sensitive. You're difficult. You're the problem. But now here I was, with a book, a life, a home, all built from the ashes of the story they tried to bury. And yet, even with all of that, I still found myself hoping, not for an apology I knew that would never come. Not really, but maybe, just maybe, for a little grace. A little acknowledgement that what happened hurt, that I didn't deserve it. That I had done something hard and brave and worthwhile. I didn't expect that moment to come at the farmer's market. It was a random Saturday. Cool breeze, flannel weather. I was walking between stalls, sipping hot cider and buying overpriced honey when I spotted Abby waving at me from the other side of a table stacked with handmade candles. She wasn't alone. Next to her, in jeans and a leather jacket I'd never seen before, was Brandon. I stopped in my tracks. I hadn't spoken to him in almost a year. The last words we exchanged were in the frozen food aisle, when he accused me of playing the victim, and I basically told him to go screw himself. He looked different now. More tired. His eyes softer. He raised a hand awkwardly when he saw me, like a peace sign that got stuck halfway. Abby motioned me over. I hesitated. Then walked toward them. Hey, I said, careful. Hey, Brandon said. You look good. Thanks, I replied, guarded. You too. We stood there for a moment, surrounded by the scent of cinnamon and goat cheese samples and fall mums. Then he said, I read your blog. I blinked. Oh. Abby sent me a few posts. Then I started reading the rest. He rubbed the back of his neck. You're a good writer. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know it was that bad, he added. I mean, I saw some of it. But I didn't feel it, you know? You were always so calm. Or sarcastic. I didn't know what was going on underneath. I nodded slowly. That's kind of the point. No one did. Because no one asked. He looked down. You're right. Abby stood between us like a human bridge, eyes flicking back and forth. Then Brandon said something I didn't expect. I'm sorry. He didn't follow it up with a defense. Didn't make it about him. Didn't wrap it in excuses. Just, I'm sorry. I swallowed. That means a lot. He nodded, like he didn't expect forgiveness, but wanted me to hear it anyway. We ended up getting cider together, sat on a bench under a tree while Abby wandered off to look at jewelry. Brandon told me about his marriage, apparently rocky. His job boring. His back pain a nightmare I didn't believe was real until I hit 30. We laughed. A little, not like old times, but like something new, and when we parted ways, he said, I'd like to come see the house. If you're okay with that. I told him I'd think about it. That night, I sat on my porch with a blanket around my shoulders and scrolled through our old family photos on Facebook, Brandon with his arm around me at my college graduation. Abby clinging to my waist at the beach when she was 10. Mom smiling in the background of a Thanksgiving dinner I cooked entirely by myself. It hurt. But not like before. It hurt like something healing, like the way a cut stings when you clean it. Later that week, my editor sent me the first mock-up of the book cover. It was simple, white background. A small, hand-drawn illustration of a cracked house with flowers growing through the cracks. The title, Next Door to Goodbye. It took my breath away, because that's exactly what this story was. Not a revenge arc, not a redemption tale, just a woman who lived right next to the life she used to want. And chose something else instead. I posted the cover reveal on my blog the next day. I didn't tag anyone. Didn't gloat, just said, this is the book I didn't know I was writing. And I'm so damn proud of her. The comments poured in, readers cheering, crying. pre-ordering, and then one comment stood out, anonymous. No profile picture, just 3 words, I'm proud too. I didn't know who sent it, but part of me, the deep, quiet part, hoped it was her. My mom. Or maybe that was just me, trying to heal something one more inch. Either way, I closed my laptop with a full heart, and for the first time in years, I felt it, truly, fully. I had made it, not to fame, not to forgiveness, but to freedom. The kind you build, brick by painful brick, in a house right next door to everything you once thought you'd need, and found out you never really did. They say time heals all wounds. That's a lie. Time just gives you space to learn how to carry them. Some you patch, some you scar over, some you learn to live beside, like a ghost that stops startling you but never quite leaves. That's what my family became, ghosts with keys to my past. They still lived next door. They still mowed the lawn at 8 a.m. on Saturdays. Still hung their laundry outside like we were in the 1950s. Still acted like I wasn't there, except now, the silence wasn't theirs alone. I had chosen it too. The book release was coming up fast. My publisher sent over press requests, potential podcast interviews, and a rough tour schedule for indie bookshops. It was surreal, wild, exhausting, and terrifying, because telling the story in blog posts behind a screen to faceless usernames was one thing, but standing in a bookstore, reading passages about being disowned by your own parents while a dozen strangers watched you try not to cry, that was another. I knew I had to tell them, not out of obligation, but out of respect for myself. The next Sunday, I printed out the official release flyer and walked next door, heart pounding, palms sweating. I rang the bell. My dad answered. He looked surprised. A little older than I remembered. More gray at his temples. But his eyes were the same. Hi, I said. Jenna, he said carefully. Everything all right? I handed him the flyer. I thought you should know. The book is coming out in a few weeks. There might be interviews. Press. He looked down at the page, saw the cover, read the title. I watched something shift in his face. Not rage. Not disappointment. Something more dangerous. Resentment. This is about us. It wasn't a question. It's about me, I said quietly. And what I lived through. He scoffed. And you're just putting it out there for the world to see? Our dirty laundry. No, I said. I'm putting my truth out there. You're the one who made it dirty. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then handed the paper back. You should have stayed quiet. And that? That told me everything I ever needed to know, not just about him, but about who I'd become, because the old Jenna would have cried, apologized, torn up the flyer and backed down, but the woman standing on that porch, she smiled. Calm, cool, and said, I stayed quiet for 27 years. I'm done now. Then I walked away. That night, I posted a reel on Instagram, just a simple one, no voiceover, just the cover of the book, a clip of my house, and the words, sometimes you don't burn bridges. You just walk across them and never look back. It hit 800,000 views in 2 days. I started getting messages from women all over the world. One said, my dad told me to leave and never come back. I've spent 5 years trying to be good enough to be welcomed home. But maybe I've had a home in me all along. Another, you don't know how much I needed your story. You made me feel like I wasn't crazy for walking away. Each message lit something in me, and for the first time, I stopped wondering if I was doing the right thing, because I already had, and that belief carried me through the book launch. The first reading was in a tiny bookstore 2 towns over. 15 people came. Mostly women. A couple men who sat quietly in the back and didn't ask questions. One teenage girl with her mom who kept squeezing her hand. I read from chapter 4, the one where I walked out of my parents' house after Brandon's birthday party. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone clapped, then another, and another. Until the whole room was clapping for me. I went home that night and cried harder than I had in months, not because I was sad, but because I had finally felt seen. And of course, that's when Claire reached out. Claire is my cousin. Technically, second cousin, but close enough. We used to play dress up together. Wrote fanfiction about boy bands. Got drunk behind my parents' shed once when we were 17 and swore we'd never tell. She disappeared after the fallout. Didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't reach out even when I knew she'd read the blog, but the day after the book launched, she sent me a message, "Can I come by?" I stared at it for 10 minutes, then typed back, "Sure. Tomorrow. Noon." She showed up wearing jeans and a thrifted hoodie, her red curls tied in a knot like they always were when she was anxious. She hugged me at the door, and I hugged her back. We sat at the kitchen island. She glanced around. "You did good, Jenna. This place feels solid." I smiled. "It is." She looked down. "I'm sorry I wasn't there." I noticed. She winced. I didn't know what to say. "Try starting with the truth," I said, not unkindly. She sighed. "Okay. The truth is I believed you. I always believed you. But I also didn't want to be the next one exiled. So I stayed quiet." I nodded slowly. "I get it." "I do. But I'm ashamed of it," she said. "Because you were brave. And I was a coward." I reached across the counter and touched her hand. "You weren't a coward. You were scared. And you're not alone in that." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "You're different now," she said. "I had to be." She stayed for 2 hours. We talked about everything. Our childhood. Her boyfriend. The way our family makes people feel like they owe them love in exchange for silence. Before she left, she looked at me and said, "I hope they read it." I laughed. "Oh, they will." She paused. "And when they do?" I shrugged. "That's their problem now." And that's what I've learned through all of this. Sometimes you can't fix what broke. Sometimes you don't get the movie-ending hug. Sometimes you just buy the house next door and live a better life within arm's reach of the people who told you it wasn't possible. And that's better than any apology. It's strange how power shifts, not always in big, dramatic moments, but in the quiet ones, like walking into the grocery store and hearing your name whispered, not in pity, but in recognition. Like seeing someone who used to ignore your calls suddenly reposting your book cover on their story with a caption like, "So proud of this brave soul." Or, like it did for me, in the form of a knock on the door. It was a rainy Tuesday morning. I was in my robe, hair tied up, working on edits for a second essay collection. The sky was gray, the windows were fogged up, and my cat was curled in my lap like a soft, judgmental loaf. The knock was soft, hesitant. I got up, wiped my hands on my robe, and opened the door, and there she was. My mother. She was holding a clear plastic folder, sealed with a snap, like it belonged to some kind of presentation. She looked tired. Not in a dramatic movie star way. In the real way. Like someone who hadn't been sleeping, or had been sleeping too much but not resting. Her sweater was soaked at the shoulders from the rain. "Hi," she said. I didn't invite her in. I just nodded. She held out the folder. "Can we talk?" I hesitated. Then I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, carefully, like the floor might break under her. I led her to the kitchen. She sat across from me like a guest in a stranger's home, which, I guess, is what she was now. I didn't offer her coffee. She didn't ask. She set the folder on the table. "I've read the book," she said. I nodded once. "I figured." She looked down. It was hard. I'm sure it was. But it was fair. That made me pause. She glanced up. "I know you probably expected me to come over and beg you to take it down. Or say it wasn't true. But I won't." I waited. She opened the folder. Inside were printed copies of my posts, marked with highlighter and notes in the margins. "I started printing them out last year," she said softly. "At first, I was furious. Thought you were doing it to embarrass us. To make us the villains. And now?" I asked. She looked at me. "Now I realize we didn't need your help to do that. We did it all on our own." I swallowed. That was not the woman I remembered. She pointed to one page. "This line, where you said, I was never angry that they didn't save me. I was angry they acted like I didn't need saving." Her voice cracked. That gutted me. I said nothing. "I didn't know how much you were carrying," she continued. I thought I was protecting you by not getting involved. Letting you and your father work things out on your own. But really, I was just abandoning you." I felt the tears well up before I could stop them, and for the first time, I didn't blink them back. I let her see. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked quietly. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook, old, weathered, bound in worn leather. "I started journaling," she said. After I read the third post. I couldn't sleep, so I wrote. Not for anyone. Just for me. She slid it across the table. I opened it slowly. The first page was dated 9 months ago. The second line read, I think I failed my daughter. I closed the book. My throat was tight. My hands shook slightly. I know it doesn't fix anything, she said. But I wanted you to know I'm trying. I stared at her. This woman who had once watched me walk away with a suitcase and didn't follow. This woman who had stayed silent while I slept on couches and stared at empty bank accounts. I don't know what you want from me, I whispered. She shook her head. I don't want anything. I just wanted to tell you I see you now. All of you. And I'm sorry I didn't before. We sat in silence for a long time. Eventually, she stood. She didn't ask for a hug. She didn't linger. At the door, she said, if you ever want me in your life again, even just a little, I'll be here. Then she walked into the rain, and I closed the door behind her. Later that night, I sat with her journal in my lap. I didn't read past the second entry, not yet, but I didn't throw it away either. Because healing doesn't come in one perfect apology. It comes in effort. In changed behavior. In showing up. And maybe, just maybe, this was her first real try. That weekend, I hosted a book signing at the biggest indie bookstore in the city. There was a line down the block. I wore a blue dress. The one that made me feel like a grown-up version of the girl who used to beg for scraps of love across the dinner table. People hugged me, thanked me, told me they drove 2 hours just to say I felt seen. One woman sobbed in front of me and said, your story made me leave my parents' house for good. I kept going back even though they kept hurting me. But after I read your blog, I realized I was worth saving. I hugged her. I cried with her, and I signed her book with shaky hands and a full heart. After everyone left, I sat in the empty aisle and just breathed. The store manager handed me a note. Someone dropped this off earlier. Didn't stay. Just asked me to give it to you. I opened it. It was written in familiar handwriting. Simple, I'm proud of you. I hope that's not too late to say. Mom. I folded it up and held it tight, because it wasn't too late. Not for that. Not for me. Maybe not even for us. And that's when I realized something I hadn't been able to name until that exact moment. This whole time, I thought I was rebuilding despite what they did to me, but really, I was rebuilding because of it. The pain. The betrayal. The silence. It all cleared the space I needed to build something new, and next door, that house full of ghosts, it didn't haunt me anymore. Not because they were gone, but because I'd stopped giving them the keys. The first time I let my mother back into the house, I didn't tell anyone. Not Abby. Not Brandon. Not even my closest friends who'd followed every raw chapter of this story like it was a Netflix series they couldn't stop binging. I just opened the door. It was a Tuesday. Bright. Quiet. The kind of late autumn morning where everything smells like cold air and drying leaves, and even the breeze feels like it's whispering, let go. She had texted that morning, no pressure. But I made some soup. Thought maybe you'd want a break from writing. I almost ignored it, but I didn't. And when she knocked, I opened the door, stepped aside, and nodded toward the kitchen. That's it. An emotional welcome. An dramatic hug. Just a silent invitation to step inside. She placed the Tupperware on the counter and said softly, I didn't use onions. I remember you don't like them in soup. That one sentence hit harder than I expected, because for years, she had made chili, stews, casseroles, all full of onions, telling me to just pick them out. And now here she was, trying to remember the version of me she'd ignored. She sat at the table. I reheated the soup, poured us both tea, and for 20 minutes, we didn't talk about the book or the past. We talked about her garden, about my cat, about the neighbor across the street who apparently retired and now mowed everyone's lawn just for the hell of it. And when she left, she didn't ask for anything. She just said, thank you for letting me sit here. That was it, and it was enough, because healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it knocks softly and asks to come in without demanding forgiveness. And sometimes you say yes, not because they deserve it, but because you do, that week. I wrote a new blog post, not about betrayal, not about pain, about boundaries, about how sometimes forgiveness is less about letting them off the hook and more about releasing the grip you have on the version of yourself who stayed angry just to Feel in control. I wrote. You can open your door without erasing the past. You can sit across from someone who hurt you and still choose yourself in every word, every breath, every silence. It became my most shared post of the year. Thousands of people commented. One woman wrote, "My mom never apologized, but she started sitting next to me at church again." I used to think that wasn't enough. Now I think maybe it's the only apology I'll ever get, and I'm learning how to let that be okay. That stayed with me because I didn't know yet if I wanted to let things be okay. I wasn't sure if I could let go without it feeling like giving in. But the next visit came a week later, then another, and slowly, we built something. Not a full relationship. Not trust. Not yet, but something that looked like trying. One day, she brought an old box of my things. It had my name written in faded marker, Jenna, old desk, and inside were notebooks, Polaroids, crumpled sketches from when I wanted to be a designer at 15. Underneath it all, there was a small envelope. I opened it. It was a letter from me, written when I was 17, titled, "Things I Want to Remember About Myself." I read it aloud. I want to remember that I like black licorice even if everyone else hates it. I want to remember that being sensitive is not the same as being weak. I want to remember that just because someone doesn't understand me doesn't mean I'm wrong. I felt my chest tighten. I looked at my mom. She was already crying. "I forgot I kept that," she whispered. "But when I found it, I knew I had to give it back to you." And in that moment, I saw the girl I used to be, the one who wrote that letter, and the woman I'd become, staring each other down through time, and I smiled, because I hadn't let her down. I hadn't let me down. A few weeks later, I got the call from the bookstore. They wanted to do a local reading and signing, but this time at the shop right here in our town, the one my parents still went to. The one that carried all the community newspapers and printed flyers on their corkboard. At first, I said no. I didn't want the awkward stares. Didn't want the tension. Didn't want my old high school teachers or the neighbor who once called me too dramatic after my father kicked me out to be sitting there in the front row like this was a talent show. But then I remembered something Claire once said in her journal. Courage isn't showing up when you know you'll be cheered for. It's showing up even when you're scared the silence will crush you. So I called the bookstore and said yes. I didn't invite my parents, but word got around. Small towns are like that. The night of the event, I wore black jeans and a green sweater. The same one I wore the night I signed my book deal, like some kind of quiet armor. The room filled slowly. People from all corners of my life. Old friends. Strangers who knew me only from the internet. Readers who'd driven from out of town just to hear me speak in the same zip code where I almost lost myself. I read a chapter about the early days. About moving back in with my parents after losing my job. About how silence can be louder than screaming. About how sometimes survival means walking away even if your heart's still standing in their hallway. When I finished, the applause was soft but steady, and then, from the back, I saw her. My mom. She was standing near the door. Hands clasped. Eyes shiny, not smiling. Not crying, just watching, and when we locked eyes, she nodded once, and I nodded back. That was all. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't spiral. I just sat on my porch after everyone left, blanket over my shoulders, sipping lukewarm tea and letting the quiet wrap around me like a friend I hadn't seen in a long time. I thought about what I used to believe healing would look like. A big dramatic showdown, tears, reunions, the kind of apology that fixes everything. But the truth, healing isn't an ending. It's a practice. 1,000 tiny choices to come back to yourself. To hold the parts they couldn't love with gentleness. To build something solid enough to stand on, even when no one claps, even when no one comes home. That's what this house is now. Not a monument to my pain, not a trophy for my resilience, just a quiet, stubborn declaration. I stayed, even when they told me I couldn't, even when they walked away. Even when it hurt. I stayed, and I built, right next door to the wreckage, right on top of the ache, and somehow, I bloomed. I always thought closure came in one moment, like a key turning. A letter in the mail. A long overdue apology that cracks you open and pours out all the resentment you've been carrying like a boulder between your ribs. But that's not how it works. Closure doesn't show up when you want it to. It arrives slowly, in the smallest acts, like when you vacuum your own floors without thinking about how you used to do it for people who never noticed. Like when you set your own alarm, not because you have to prove anything, but because the life you're building finally feels worth waking up to. Like when you sit in your kitchen on a regular Tuesday morning, reading the news, sipping coffee, and you realize you're not scared anymore. That's how it felt the day I finally forgave them. Not because they earned it, but because I did. It happened in a moment I didn't expect, one of those mundane, throwaway mornings where nothing is happening and everything is quiet. My cat was curled up on the chair across from me. A candle burned on the counter. It smelled like orange peel and clove. I'd just finished cleaning the windows when I paused at the front one, the one that faced my parents' driveway. My mom was out front, struggling to unload bags from the trunk. My dad was on the porch, talking on the phone, ignoring her. She dropped one. Bent slowly to pick it up, and something about the way her shoulders slumped broke something in me, not out of pity, not because she looked old or tired, but because I realized in that moment, she's not the villain anymore. She's just a person, flawed, human, complicated, and so was I. I stepped outside without thinking, walked over the grass barefoot, and said, "Need help?" She looked up, startled, then nodded. We didn't speak much. I took 2 bags. She took the last. We walked back toward her door together, and just before we stepped onto the porch, she whispered, "Thank you." I didn't say, "You're welcome." I didn't hug her. I just nodded once, and that was the moment I let it go, all of it, the hurt, the bitterness, the way I used to replay our fights like old voicemail messages, hoping I could rewrite them. It all fell off me like water. And in its place, peace, real peace, not the kind that pretends the past never happened, the kind that knows it did and decides to breathe anyway. That night, I wrote a final blog post, the one I knew would close the loop for good. I titled it, "What Healing Actually Looks Like." And I wrote, "It's not always a sunrise. Sometimes it's a quiet Tuesday. It's not always a reunion. Sometimes it's a small nod on the front porch. It's not always justice. Sometimes it's grace. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't knock down doors. It creeps in, one breath at a time, until one day, you look around and your life no longer hurts to live in." I hit publish and closed the laptop. I didn't check the comments. I didn't track the shares, because this one wasn't for them. It was for me. A few days later, Abby called. "You free this weekend?" "Depends. We're doing dinner at Mom and Dad's. They said you should come." I hesitated. She added quickly, "No pressure. But it would mean something to all of us." I told her I'd think about it, and I did. Hard. I talked to my therapist, to Claire, even to the cat, who obviously had no opinions but still looked concerned when I paced the living room talking to myself about what dinner might be like. What if it was awkward? What if they expected me to pretend nothing happened? What if they wanted me to make it okay? But eventually, I realized something. I wasn't the same girl who left that house with a suitcase and shame bleeding out of her eyes. I wasn't going there to fix anything. I was going because I could. Because the house next door wasn't a wall anymore. It was a bridge. I went. I wore a simple dress and brought a bottle of wine. I knocked once before opening the door, and it shocked me how familiar the creak still sounded. Abby hugged me first, then my mom. Then, to my surprise, even my dad stood up and nodded. Dinner was quiet at first, careful, but there were no digs, no veiled insults, no tension disguised as politeness, just food and stories and laughter, real, unforced laughter. When Brandon showed up late and accidentally knocked over a glass of water, just like he used to when we were kids. At the end of the night, my mom walked me to the door. "You don't have to come back," she said. "But I hope you do." And I smiled, because for the first time, I believed her. As I stepped outside, I looked over at my own house, porch light glowing, windows warm. My life. My rules. My space. And I thought back to that first night, the day I moved in, when I dragged my boxes across the lawn with nothing but spite and heartbreak pushing me forward. I had no idea back then what this house would become. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't proof. It wasn't even freedom. Not at first. It was just a second chance. To choose myself. To stop begging for love I had to contort myself to receive. To live without tiptoeing. To take up space, and slowly, room by room, day by day. I turned that second chance into a life, not perfect, not painless, but mine. And now, the house next door, it didn't hold power over me anymore. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a symbol of loss. It was just a house, with people inside trying, in their broken, awkward, messy way, to find their way back. And maybe they never will. Maybe they'll mess it up again. Maybe I'll walk away again. But either way, I'm not afraid anymore. Because I built something stronger than their silence. I built a home right next door, right from the wreckage. And that's the real ending. Not a bow, not a reunion, just a woman, standing in her own light, knowing full well she doesn't need anyone else's permission to shine.